When you reflect on the things that brought you joy as a child, it's often with nostalgia and a warm fondness in your heart. You might revisit those memories with a smile, recalling the innocence and simple pleasures they brought into your life. Yet, amidst all those reflections, do you sometimes find yourself lamenting? Do you grieve for what could have been? Do your feelings surpass mere wistfulness and longing? Can you recognize now that the thing you held dear was brimming with untapped potential, a potential that might be forever lost and forgotten? Do you see how its future might have been brighter and its value more cherished had it just been rightly nurtured?
You gotta fight for what's right before it's gone, gone, gone. This is Bakugan.
As someone who loved the Bakugan series as a kid and later moved on from it, as kids do, returning to it as an adult has been nostalgic, but also sad. In a world where Pokemon continues to dominate everything, and Beyblade is entering its 25th year, Bakugan has floundered. As other franchises grow and evolve, it struggles to keep up, let alone match pace. In examining its history, I can see the problems that Spin Master has acknowledged and solved, but also everything weighing them down. I can see so much lost potential in this series that I love, and not being able to do anything about it is driving me insane. So, at the very least, today I'm going to talk about it. The ways it stagnated and misstepped, and how, as a fan, I think it could be doing better. For those unfamiliar, Bakugan is a franchise of toys created by Canadian company Spin Master in 2008. You might recognize them from anime, commercials, or toy aisles. They're little plastic marbles that pop open when they land on a magnet. Kinda. It's hard to make a comparison to other franchises when it comes to Bakugan. They transform, like Transformers, and they're a game with a focus on the toys, like Beyblade, but trading cards are an integral part of the experience. So, in a sense, they're both derivative and unique. There have been 4 series thus far. Generation 1 from 2008 to 2012, Bakutech, a sort of Generation 1.5 from 2013 to 14, Generation 2 from 2015 to 2023, and Generation 3 from 2023 to 2024. When I first started writing this video, I was more than ready to lambast Spin Master for their handling of Bakugan, and to an extent I still am. But as my research deepened, I actually found myself feeling sort of bad for them. Many concepts and criticisms I had regarding their ability to promote Bakugan as a series were legitimately considered, but hindered by mismanagement and worsened by the COVID pandemic. Generation 2 suffered as a result, and so you might have thought that Generation 3 would be the opportunity to do these things right. Instead, we got an absolutely comical failure of a series. I could cut a lot down on this video if it were not for Generation 3. Everything Generation 2 did right, Generation 3 did wrong, and then some. If Generation 2 broke its leg midway through a marathon but still managed to finish the race, Generation 3 tripped, fell in the mud, and drowned before it could even make it to the starting line. To put it bluntly, Spin Master has gotten complacent. Their franchises are primarily composed of 2 demographics, those with pre-established fans from licensed series, or those that are exclusively kid-oriented. Spin Master doesn't have to worry about building a fanbase for Star Wars, after all, and when a kid ages out of Paw Patrol, the executives shrug and move on to the next one who's just aged in. Spin Master isn't aiming to sell to Paw Patrol fans in their mid-20s with no kids and a disposable income, and that's fine. It works for a franchise aimed at toddlers and young children. But in coming after the tween-age population with the Bakugan series, Spin Master has a tendency to ignore an important and valuable audience: those adults with money and the incentive to spend it. Bakugan's effort, especially with Generation 3, to try and dip into the Beyblade audience demonstrates a lack of understanding as to why Beyblade, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and similar competitors succeed as the years go by. They're multi-generational. Spin Master is in a position where there are kids who just found the show, people who grew up with the franchise and have monetary independence, and those who get into it as an adult and can't help but find themselves invested. This is the ideal for a long-standing franchise like Bakugan. You keep producing new media and gaining new fans on top of existing ones. Looking at similar franchises, Beyblade and LEGO are prime examples of leveraging this multi-generational demographic. Beyblade X has begun advertising itself as a sport aimed at an older audience and explicitly featuring adults in their marketing and its Pro line of products. LEGO has released a variety of sets that are extravagant, expensive, and specifically targeted at adults. Spin Master should learn from this, because it's all downhill from here. Bakugan keeps dumbing down its game design. A streamlined game isn't a bad thing. Generation 1 got comically complicated with its number of gameplay elements. Between Trap Bakugan, Battle Suits, Mobile Assault, Baku Nano, Battle Gear, and Mechtagon, it's understandable that Generation 2 was pared down. But it seems like it was pared down too much, considering the state Generation 3 ended up in. The way Bakugan plays as a game varies from series to series, but generally, any pack of Bakugan comes with two types of cards: ability cards and gate cards. When you and your opponent both roll a Bakugan onto the same gate card, because it's made of metal, the magnets inside the Bakugan trigger and it pops open. Then, you flip over the card and the details on the gate card change the Bakugan's power. Ability cards can be played throughout the turns by each player, which each cause further effects. As a general rule, whichever Bakugan has the highest power wins. Generation 2 had its own division of Pro products, much like Beyblade. The intention seemed to be to facilitate more complicated and meta Bakugan for the older audience, while keeping it enjoyable for the younger demographic. Instead, it ended up splitting the game's products between the cards and the toys. The concept is good, though. They could strengthen the iconography of the Pro products to more directly appeal to adults and make them stand out a bit more against the Bakugan aimed more at the younger demographic. Then, put more complicated and meta cards and figures in those sets. I specify figures because, despite the prevalence and success of other TCGs throughout the years, it's kind of hard to sell Bakugan as one. It's difficult for the average consumer to see Bakugan as a card game, even though the cards have always been a prominent element. The toys are the feature and the selling point, as they should be, but as a result, separating the cards into their own product feels reductive. The cards alone aren't as exciting as the toys. The cancellation of the Pro line in Generation 2, 3 seasons into a 5-season series, further impeded the game's backbone and the enjoyment of its older players. Supply chain issues can also cause problems to the metagame if cards are split up and made exclusive to certain products. This occurred with Armored Alliance's Brawler packs in 2020, which had a set of 21 cards unique to the packs that are now almost impossible to find due to their scarce release. Buying Bakugan isn't as exciting as it could be. I understand, especially early in a series' life, that you really need to show off and sell the concept of the toys. These are little mecha marbles that pop open into monsters.
Land on a cart to unleash the beast. Dragonoid, how do you roll?
Great. That said, I think one of the best changes Spin Master could make would be Bakugan blind boxes. While there's a few instances in Japan of selling Bakugan in gachapon machines, Spin Master has done relatively little with the concept of blind boxes. I've heard that Generation 1 had some short-lived blind bags, and the COVID pandemic disrupted Generation's 2 card-focused attempt. Their integration would help with one of this series' major problems as a toy line: going into a store and seeing a bunch of the exact same Bakugan. It's kind of a fact of life that some stores will end up with either an excess or a deficit of certain Bakugan, as they do most toys, and this would help mitigate that issue. They would also promote diversity, ensuring that no single Bakugan could be bought out at a store and leaving other fans without options, especially Generation 2 and 3's rarer chase variants. A blind box system would also help discourage a behavior that proliferated during Generation 2, where a lot of resellers snatched rare, sealed Bakugan off the shelves in hopes of flipping them for a profit. Not only does this disappoint fans, it ends up artificially increasing the prices of certain products on the secondary market, and leaving dozens of unwanted Bakugan clogging up store shelves. It becomes obvious when all the most sought-after Bakugan are bought up, resulting in a toy aisle filled with 18 identical Dragonoids. New products aren't ordered because the remaining ones aren't selling. No one buys anything because the products are all old and identical. It creates a self-perpetuating cycle. Plus, to be blunt about it, both kids and collectors love blind bags. It makes the process of opening a toy into something more exciting, and synergizes well with the randomized nature of the accompanying cards. In utter defiance of all its contemporaries, Bakugan have somehow been getting simpler over time. In a sense, this isn't totally a bad thing. It can be tough to expect a grown adult to figure out how some of these figures work, let alone a child, and I am unfortunately speaking from experience. So I can understand and, to an extent, agree with toning down the complexity of some Bakugan. Except they simplified the color design. When I heard they got rid of attributes in Generation 3, I thought, oh, now they can use interesting color schemes without being beholden to a set of palettes. And then they just did a bunch of boring basic recolors anyway? Spin Master seems to believe that alternate colors and styles for Bakugan are desirable because they're rare, and not because they're cool. You can see this with Generation 2 especially. Their variants are almost exclusively platinum, diamond, translucent, or some combination thereof. Compare this to Generation 1, where there were quite a few special treatments across each series, more than 30 in total. The color palettes of attributes even changed between seasons, which lent quite a bit to making each wave feel distinct in style. Were most of these treatments just recolors anyway? Yeah. So why doesn't Generation 2 seem to bother with them? Generation 3 experimented a little more in style with its galactic chases and gold special attacks, but otherwise, if you go shopping for Generation 3, you're met with a wall of identical looking balls in differently plain colors. Generation 3 neutered absolutely everything cool about Generation 2's Bakugan. They have ripcords, because Spin Master needed a gimmick for some reason, and that no doubt ended up limiting a lot of the design space. The upper halves tend to be a bit more complicated, but the lower halves are almost always half a sphere, with legs. Which isn't to say that Generation 2 didn't have its problems. Looking at its core Bakugan, the first thing you tend to notice is that they're chunky. Allowing a greater range of design and movement came at the cost of wasted space in a way that leaves a lot of the Bakugan more interesting technically, but not especially cool. I wouldn't be surprised if this design quirk ended up turning a lot of people off of Generation 2, which is a shame because Generation 2 also had some absolute bangers of Bakugan designs, namely the Ultras. By moving around the location of the magnet in the design process rather than it being stuck to just the bottom of the Bakugan, some really great concepts were developed. This resulted in the Ultra series having some of the coolest designs ever made for the franchise, the likes of which I could have only dreamed of as a kid. The first time I saw Ultra Fangzor, I just about cried. That is a work of art right there. Look at it. It stands by itself. I really think Transformers is a great example that Spin Master should learn from in this field. Transformers has toys oriented towards adults, and they are visually more elaborate, like the Ultras. The Ultras are more accurate to the show versions of the Bakugan, and their complexity helped market them to an older demographic. Compared to the normal Bakugan that were simpler but also sturdier when it came to the kind of play a child might engage in, these Bakugan could explore more innovative possibilities. This section is about fandom, but I don't mean fandom as in the fans themselves. I mean the capacity for fans to become invested in their role in the Bakugan universe. When it comes to other card games or toys, it's hard to represent the merchandise itself as a living creature. That's one of the great things about Bakugan as a concept. It isn't just about toys that turn into monsters, it's about toys that are alive. Bakugan as a show sells the idea that that tiny plastic ball is still a thinking, living creature, even when it can't become some sort of epic monster in our reality. The toys aren't approximations of the series characters. The toys are the characters, at least for Generations 1 and 3. Despite this, it's largely treated as a given in-universe with relatively little explanation. Bakugan are aliens from space that mysteriously get confined into a toy-like ball form when they're on the planet Earth. Bakugan have a human-level intelligence, but they're mostly seen as a species that brawls. Little about Vistroyan civilization and customs is relevant beyond that. There's so much depth there for fans to speculate over. Why do Bakugan need brawlers when they're in our world? How different are the cultures of each of the 6 Bakugan attributes? For that matter, what is Bakugan society like? These things get touched on, but never really explored. The Bakugan series, especially Generations 2 and 3, are set almost exclusively on Earth. I think the appeal of its intergalactic lore often ends up getting overlooked, which is a shame. Additionally, and this is by far my pettiest gripe, why is every Bakugan generation about Dan Kuso? If we're making a Transformers comparison, you could argue that Dragonoid is the Optimus Prime of the Bakugan series, so its recurrence makes sense. But, to be frank, who cares about Dan Kuso? He isn't Ash Ketchum. We're not watching him grow and learn over the decades as the show progresses. He reaches a pinnacle, his story is over, and then they introduce him again, and they do it all again, except he's technically a different person because it's a different series. The other day, I found out that there are smartphone-controlled Beyblades. Conceptually, these might be the coolest thing that Beyblade has ever produced. The idea that you can direct your Beyblade to act according to your commands, the same as they do in the show? Fantastic. The integration of an app that boosts your gameplay experience, something that's relatively hard to do even with a modern toy-based game, really highlights how outshined Bakugan is in the field of technology. Generation 2 had a database and news app with a basic version of the game to play against AI opponents, and that's it. Generation 3 didn't even bother to make an app at all, let alone attempt to do something actually interesting. So let's consider some of the simplest possible executions of app integration for Bakugan beyond that of a database. What if the Bakugan had an NFC chip? Let's say you put your Bakugan on your phone after you roll it and it transforms. Maybe the Bakugan lights up when your phone registers it, a la some Skylanders. Or it plays the Bakugan's roar from the show without needing that technology to be built into the toy itself. Placing the Bakugan on a phone could also activate a mechanism by way of NFC as well as, or even in the place of, a magnet, like how Generation 1's Double Strike had 2 different transformation triggers. Maybe your Bakugan, when it won a battle, could unlock a new transformation. NFC could also be put into the game's cards, allowing a phone to do the point calculation of the game for you. In the process, it makes it easier to understand for younger players and convenient for older. It could even be made to work without an internet connection, meaning the app would be useful and the game playable anywhere. Generations 1 and 3 have both had toys packaged with codes that would allow you to acquire the corresponding Bakugan online. Back in Generation 1, it was Spin Master's MMO, Bakugan Dimensions, and Generations 2 and 3 have each had partnerships with Roblox. The Roblox partnership I can understand. It has a lower investment requirement than an entire independent game, and it appeals well enough to the kids who enjoy it. But it's not a digital version of the Bakugan game itself. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, even a more obscure choice, here in the West at least, like Cardfight Vanguard had a mobile game adaptation of its TCG. Beyblade has an app where you spin tops at each other, and you can get new tops by playing the app, spending money, or buying the toys. Having a way for new players or those who live in more rural areas to get invested in and actually play the card game you spent time designing is something that Bakugan is sorely missing. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, for reasons that are beyond me, most Bakugan social media has appeared abandoned since the end of Generation 2. Their TikTok and Instagram accounts have been posted in over 6 months at time of writing. Their Facebook only changed its banner to promote the new series, and their Twitter has been inactive since 2021. Only their YouTube seems to still be putting out anything, and even then it's either clips from the show or oddly overproduced product demonstrations. To be frank, if there's a Bakugan you want to buy, Googling it is a nightmare. Perhaps you want a Dragonoid from Generation 2, a basic, Battle Planet Era Dragonoid in Pyrus. The simple search of Pyrus Dragonoid will bring up a dozen different toys in a dozen different printings and treatments. What do you mean you're not looking for Dragonoid Ultra? Are you sure? There are 8 different Pyrus Dragonoid Ultras to choose from. How about Pyrus Hyper Dragonoid and Pyrus Neo Dragonoid, which each exist in both Generations 1 and 2? No? Generation 3 makes it even more of a nightmare by discarding attributes and using much simpler names. I've seen adults who buy their nieces and nephews a hockey Stanley Cup as opposed to the one you drink out of. How easily is the average parent going to know what their kid means when they ask for a green wing? Or when they want a green Trox? Is it okay to get a Trox? A titanium Trox? A special attack Trox? Or a special attack titanium Trox? And that's also if you don't count Generation 2's various forms of Trox. From a consumer's perspective, it's not that exciting to use the same names over and over again. How often is a fan going to look at Bakugan products and think, oh yay, another Pyrus Dragonoid that's barely any different from the last one? I mean, if you're going to grandfather these names in, can you at least give each generation a different suffix or something? I promise you that even the child will understand that Dragonoid and Dragonado and Dragobot or whatever are all related somehow. The series and the season names are unintuitive as well, but in a different way. Bakugan, New Vestroia, doesn't mean anything to anyone who doesn't know what a Vestroia is. Likewise, Generation 2's Battle Planet makes it sound like a rehash of the original Battle Brawlers and not just an homage. This is to say nothing of Generation 3's, wait for it, Bakugan. Just Bakugan. Save for a few unique cases, these names, either by season or by series, tell you nothing about the new mechanics of the game and what makes it different from anything that came before. In contrast, Beyblade demonstrates the strength of its own naming convention. Metal Fusion, Metal Masters, Metal Fury, and Shogun Steel are seasons in a series about Beyblades made of metal. Guess what Beyblade Burst do? They burst. I am begging you, Spin Master. Give some of these series a useful subtitle. Let's talk about Bakutech. Bakutech is a fan favorite series to this day, despite having been released exclusively in Japan. Developed in collaboration with Sega Faves, formerly Sega Toys, it addressed so many series issues and made efforts to resolve them. For example, while Bakutech often share colors between attributes, they vary in tone and style. Some designs completely disregard traditional palettes to create unique looks, focusing on diverse Bakugan designs that directly influence gameplay. But in return, Bakutech became the shadow cast upon everything that followed. If Generations 2 and 3 feel like they're struggling to catch up, it's because Bakutech demonstrated what Bakugan at its best can look like. I have no doubt that the dream of many a hardcore Bakugan fan is for Spin Master to collaborate with Sega once more and enter a new renaissance of Bakugan. They imagine it reviving the magic of Bakugan in a modern context, while also inviting a new generation to join in the adventure and appreciate it as they do. And don't get me wrong, I would absolutely love that. But at this point, all I can really hope for is that the series I grew up with will someday grow up with me. Thank you for watching.